Thanks for listening and subscribing to the Clive Barker Podcast, episode 255. Jose, Ryan, and Marcus take a deep dive into the Imaginer series with the third book, Clive Barker's Imaginer 3, the first to be published by Phil and Sarah Stokes of the Clive Barker Archive. Welcome, this is episode 255 of the Clive Barker Podcast, where we're going to be talking about Clive Barker's Imaginer 3 and 4. And I'm Ryan.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Marcus.
Good to talk to you again, Marcus and Jose.
Good to be back. Thank you guys for having me again.
It's been a whole week since we last spoke.
Yeah.
So, Imaginer 3 and 4 and the age of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So what better escapism could we get for being stuck in the house?
Yeah, right. To go into these surreal worlds of paintings.
Yeah, it's been a nice escape from the reality that's around us right now, for sure.
Yeah.
And while you're hearing this, you probably already have Imaginer 7, and hopefully some people have been receiving their Imaginer number 8, which brings the series to a close, right?
Yeah. Yes, it does. I actually got Imaginer 8 just a few days ago, and like all the other ones, it's absolutely wonderful.
And Jose, I think yours is going to arrive next week, and then mine will be, I think, the week after that.
Awesome. Again, super thanks to Phil and Sarah and the Clive Barker Archive, because you guys have done a tremendous job picking this up. They've been involved with it since the beginning, but then after the second one, they kind of took the helm entirely for the whole operation, and that's when they started churning them out really quickly. So today we're going to be halfway through the series.
Yeah, so Imaginer 3 was, like you said, the very first one that was all Clive Barker Archive and wasn't put together at all by Century Guild. So other than probably a lot of the stuff was scanned for it, I'd imagine. But
and they were involved with it as well, of course. But this one was the one. I think the third one was not crowdfunded, right?
No. Only the first two were on Kickstarter.
It was a pre-order. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and 2016 was the year that this one came out. And when you open it up, I just opened up mine, and there's a little flyer in there that says the Clive Barker Archive, and it explains that they are the new publisher for these books. And it talks about Clive Barker, author, artist, filmmaker. It's kind of nice. Yeah,
and I think that was the first mention of a physical archive being established that hopefully one day people can visit and see all those things that they have there.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of the original manuscripts that were at Seraphim are now in the archive there in the UK. So between that and the paintings and stuff that they have, I'm sure it's wonderful.
Yeah. So the third one has an opening photo of Clive taking a selfie. So it's a Clive selfie right there.
Yes.
Yeah. Clive Barker, 1984. So this might have been the apartment he had on Hillfield Avenue in Crouch End, where he lived with John Gregson for a while. They broke up in 86. It was around the time the Books of Blood were coming out, and I think this might have been the apartment where they had a big party, and Clive's mom baked a cake, and Clive brought a big steak knife and a big cake knife, and he stabbed the cake, and everybody was happy. So, things were really going Clive's way around 84. This is more of a topic for Imaginer 4, where he talks about how he had to make a decision about either being a starving artist or doing something different. But for the third one, I think they are comprising paintings that go from 1993 to 2012.
Yes.
Which is actually the same for both, I think. They're both 1993 to 2012.
Yeah, it's only when we get into the later volumes that it goes up to 2017 of his more recent pieces. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
And it opens with sorry, Jose.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, adjacent to the photo you were talking about, it has a really, really wonderful quote that I absolutely love. where Clive says, quote, "I'm only really alive when I'm making art. Everything else is the silence before the cry."
Yeah.
Strong words.
Yes.
It makes me make a connection with a quote that he wrote in a picture that you can see in this book, where he wrote a quote from Blaise Pascal, and it says, "Le silence éternel de ces espaces infinis m'effraie," which means the eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me. And of course, my segue into this quote is, "And therefore I must cry." So yeah, Clive has always been the person who wants to pierce the banality with his artistic cry, and that's what he does with these beautiful paintings.
Yes.
And we open with it says Clive Barker, Imaginer, the artist as storyteller, and there's these awesome photos that are just really nostalgic, for anybody that's visited his studio house.
Yes, the old Seraphim office.
Yeah, and seeing the bookshelves with all the multiple copies and those piles of Imagica cards there, Mark, there was one that I was missing, and Mark dug it out of one of those boxes for me.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
So Clive Barker has always told stories. This is a lovely introduction here at the beginning of this book.
And it's much bigger than the introductions we saw in 1 and 2.
Yes, they're much more lengthy, and this one is like an abridged version of the Memory, Prophecy, and Fantasy books that Phil and Sarah wrote.
And something else that I should have noticed this before, maybe I'm not very perceptive, but the page numbering system, it takes off where the others, like it's one giant book, right?
Yeah,
the very first written page is 426.
Yeah. Then we get into the thousands as the series goes on, or the 1,000 at least.
I like that. It marries everything together. It makes everything one big story, huh? One big catalog. So, of course, Clive always doodled, right? So he's always like, if you've ever seen pictures of some of his manuscripts, whether it was a 25th anniversary edition of a book or whether it was Shadows in Eden, where you see all those lovely little sketches that are decorating the pages in that book, you see that Clive likes to doodle a lot. And his handwritten manuscripts are always full of these sketches where he might be describing a character in that page, and then on the side of the page, he's probably starting to make a drawing of, whatever character he's doing. So, and sometimes these things get a life of their own, right? Sometimes you will see certain faces repeat themselves throughout different Clive Barker paintings. You will see a drawing that he did at one point, doodling a guy with many hats, for example. Then it becomes a character in the Abarat. It becomes Caspar Wolfswinkel, or it becomes Lemuel Lowe in his orchard in Weave World, and a guy with a big beard. So it's great that Clive has always decorated his sketches like this, and once he found the Sumi brush, that's when he really started to take off and found this newborn flexibility in just drawing with one line, making a character with one line, and making more with that one line than he could do with an entire 5 pages of dialogue.
Yeah, and go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, and I was just going to say, I think it also at around this time, or around 93 is when it's like 91, I think, is when the Clive Barker Illustrator books came out. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, I kind of knew that he had done paintings, and I remember those Books of Blood paintings and stuff. But getting those Illustrator books, it was like, wow, there's a whole other side to him that we didn't really know that well. It's when I started obsessively collecting his stuff.
Yeah.
And you found him through Hellraiser and those movies, and then you started finding out more stuff about his art as well, right?
Yeah, through Nightbreed. I think Nightbreed was the very first thing, and I had heard about the Books of Blood, so I bought Cabal and the Books of Blood after seeing Nightbreed, and then kind of spiraled outward from there. I was trying to read really fast so that I could get through the Forbidden before Candyman came out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow!
You were going to say something, Marcus?
Oh, I was just going to say that the volume also talks about how when he was writing plays for the Dog Company and the like, that in order to make really lasting, strong characters, that he would actually draw them first. And that way they stood prominent in his mind of essentially how to make them be physical characters in the plays that he was writing, and that sort of thing.
It made for really good stage direction too. Like they mentioned this Day of the Dog 1977 little painting here with the dog person with the wearing the seductive dress.
Yeah,
you know, and it's like that's perfect stage direction just in one little image there.
Yeah, and even costume design and
yeah.
So Clive's art teacher in school was a man called Ellen Plent, and he did have a quote to say about Clive. He said his art always invited a story from it. You never looked at it and said, oh, well, there's a lovely landscape. You were inclined to say, what's going on in there? And you would look for the next one. Yeah. So, I mean, art teachers can really wake kids up for art, or they can really give you that kick towards knowing more about the art and what art is supposed to mean and how you can express yourself through art. Sometimes you get a good art teacher, sometimes you don't. I mean, I think I've always been lucky to have good art teachers that, you know, kind of pushed me into knowing more about why I was doing what I was doing, or how I could do something different, or what art is about. Sometimes people don't have that experience. I know, Ryan, didn't you say that some of your teachers didn't like some of the essays and work that you did?
Oh, well, I know as far as art teachers, I was always painting like I don't know. I mean, I was trying to be like Clive Barker even like in high school. And so they would say, like, here, paint this bowl of, you know, sketch this bowl of fruit. And I'm like putting skulls and dragons and, you know, and stuff in there. And they're like, that's not what I told you to paint.
That's how I see it, Professor.
Yeah. It was pretty stereotypical, you know.
So Clive was never very realistic in his art. He says here, I never drew from life. I couldn't understand why anybody would want to. I also wasn't very good at it, which remains true to this date. It was my mental world I was interested in, the things my inward turning eye could see. So he, in a way, he was summoning creatures and, you know, putting them down on paper. He's
also being humble when he says that, because he is really capable of painting realistic stuff, you know, like the books of blood covers. And there is one painting that we'll get to when we get to number 4 that I made a note of because it struck me. It's like, wow, this is almost like not even his style.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that Clive can paint or draw in so many different styles, and me, I've seen many, you know, hundreds of drawings and paintings that he's done. And, you know, I thought I saw it all. And once when I was at the Seraphim office, I was combing through a drawer of some of his drawings. And I asked Ben at the time, I was like, wait, this is a Clive Barker drawing? Because it looked absolutely nothing like anything he's ever done. And Ben was like, yeah, that's the thing, is that he can work in almost any style. It's just what he's developed now is so unique to him that's what he likes to work in. He can make something that looks realistic. Yeah. But what's the point? I remember reading, I'm not quite sure where, but Clive talks about the fact that why would somebody just want to like paint a piece of fruit that looks exactly like a picture of a fruit? Like there's no real meaning to that. And what Clive is doing is he's combing the depths of his unconscious to bring forth these images that no one else could conjure besides him.
Bringing new things to the world. He's bringing a new vision to the world, instead of just, you can look at an apple and see the apple. Someone paints an apple like hyper realists, you know, that make those like, you know, 6-foot portraits of someone, and it's super high realistic. It's like, okay, well, you can have just the same effect if you just get a mirror and put it over there and get the guy to stand in front of it, you know. But one, there's the craft of it. There's the the feeling of accomplishing that magnificent feat of making something, painting figuratively something, and being able to put that down in a way that's almost realistic. Of course, that also has artistic merit on its own. But what Clive does, he creates things that never existed, that people have never seen before. He creates these like worlds and creatures that you look at them and you're like, wow, I never would have imagined something like this in my wildest imagination. And here it is in a canvas right in front of me, beckoning at me, looking at me, challenging me to look, see what I'm doing in this painting. You wish you could be here and do this as well, right? I mean, you wish you could be me. Sometimes you want to, not to paraphrase like a lot of Clive stuff, but to Nightbreed, right? To be Smoke or a wolf, who's never dreamt of flying and living without death and stuff like that. That's straight out of Cabal. But there's room for all stuff. There's room for representative art. There's room for abstract art. There's room for fantastic art. There's room for everything. It's just all of the art makes the world richer. And in Clive's case, he not only creates these visions, he creates entire worlds. Like, look at the series of the Abarat. It's an entire world. It's not just isolated paintings. Like, okay, well, he made this painting, then he made this painting. These paintings are all people populate an entire universe. And that's why I think he likes to call himself an imaginer. He wants to create art that is not limited to one medium, to one niche, to one form of art, like photography or writing. And I think most of us start by thinking of Clive as a writer, and then we discover that he's an artist as well, which is also another kind of art. When I mean, paintings.
Yes, a lot of people think of him as a filmmaker first.
Yeah, a filmmaker, exactly, or a photographer, or whatever. So he jumps from medium to medium because that's just the creative force is not limited to just one thing.
And I mean, that's also shown in the variety of his styles of working too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you touched upon it earlier, but the volume also goes on to talk about the fact that the books of blood covers are so heavily detailed, and that they seemed a bit laborious for him in that, he had to use reference photos or the like that, and they took a really long time.
Sure.
Whereas, again, what you touched upon with the Sumi ink, it was so much more immediate. With just a few lines, he could do so much with so little, and it was a lot faster. And he could have the images that were coming into his head. He could put them onto paper a lot quicker. Yeah. Before you lose him or what with the like. He talks about essentially the artworks being like a form of dream journal, a visual dream journal, in which he's just chronicling these visions that are constantly coming at him, and just in a thickness or the thinness of a certain line could put forth so much emotion that I guess with the immediacy is a lot. There's a lot more satisfaction than doing something that's kind of laborious and really highly detailed.
Well, and Nicholas Vince told us that he sat he was a model for one of those books of blood covers. I think, was it the guy with the knife in his head? I think.
Yeah, I must have been several of those. Yeah. But for example, here you see on page 430 the magician poster, right? Where you brought up that he not only doodled stuff for plays, like, hey, this is what the character looks like, but he also made the posters for the plays.
He
would not only make the posters, but then they would make they would make the silk screen equipment. Silk screen posters and stuff like that, which is where the craft goes in as well. And this, for example, the magician, you mentioned reference photos. I'm pretty sure Clive used for reference the Salvador Dali portrait that has the skull made with the bodies of people.
Most certainly.
He just recreated that here, but he gave it his own twist. He gave it his own twist on it, and it works so well.
This also kind of later on it seems like it was kind of reused, not by Clive, but for the cover of the American paperback of the Hellbound Heart, right? That person that's sitting in, cross-legged, that's made out of people.
Exactly. Kirk Reinhardt, I think, is the artist that did that cover. I'm not sure if I'm correctly. I'm just remembering this. But yeah, there's a Hellbound Heart cover that has something like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's Kirk Reinhardt. He made the cover for the Hellbound Heart, where you have the man with the demons on both sides, and then there's bodies that make the eye sockets and all that stuff. So good catch there, Ryan. Yeah.
So then they go into, and I had forgotten that the very first editions of the Books of Blood didn't have the Clive Barker paintings on them.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the second edition with his paintings are superior, and I have the ones that are hardcover. I like those better.
You're talking about the Sphere edition that had the warped photos. Yeah.
Well, in the U.S., we had even worse ones with these Halloween masks with gummy bears, worms coming out of the mouth.
That's interesting. There's a page here that shows an early part of the manuscript for the Books of Blood, and there's some story titles here that I guess he changed them, or maybe these were stories that were never finished. I think I see something here. One of them says something like The Festival, The Revolution. Let's see, what else do I find here? The Rushing of the Winds, The Island. Yeah, I wonder if The Island was the one with the zombies coming out of the ocean. There's another one here that says, what's the name of this? Okay, there's Last Will and Testament, but it doesn't say, the name is different. It's not Jacqueline S.
Yeah.
It seems to say something like Anvita or something. You see that?
What number is that?
So it's on page.
No. I mean the number of the.
So in that list of titles, like the fourth one down.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. See? Last Will. Yeah, I don't.
Last Will and Testament, but you can't really make out. It sounds like an A, an N, a V, I, D, A. So I don't know that if these were early titles. Like there's one here, The Dark Behind the Door.
There's one that says amongst giants, and it's crossed out, and then it says in the hills, the cities.
Oh, see, yeah, that's so cool that you find that stuff.
And then it looks like number 22 says Bigfoot, I believe, which is so strange.
I see that too.
I'm not quite sure what that is, but yeah, I mean, you can see Rawhead as
right there.
Yeah. So I mean, and it's just and there's doodles too. Of just different faces that are really loose, but it looks like a checklist of what he was finishing and working on, and just a glimpse into his mind at that time.
It's just so cool to see these things and find out that these stories had different titles when he was working on them.
Yeah. It looks like it also says The Dark Beyond the Door in pencil.
Yeah, The Dark Beyond the Door, Beyond the Door.
In those sketches, also another one on page 441, the self-portrait. I mean, and I know this one.
Oh yes,
this one gets shown a lot, but it's really, really, it's really thought-provoking and interesting. And it shows somebody sort of withdrawn into themselves, but at the same time, even though his face is covered, it's totally looks like Clive Barker.
Yeah, it looks like he's also even holding a cigar.
Yeah, and he's holding.
Oh yeah.
And he's looking out. He's not just looking at himself or looking down. He's looking out. He's very focused and looking towards something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so basically, Clive was saying that he always felt very anxious about the absence of money. He realized that even though he was doing art, but it was not really paying the bills, right? So that's when he started, making. He got the idea for the Books of Blood out of this anthology called Dark Forces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he even says that his parents asked him to not become a painter, even though that's what he originally wanted to be.
Yeah,
that it seems like he set this time limit for himself that if he wasn't on a trajectory to making a financial living with his art by age 30, that he was going to have to figure out something else to do. But he even says, I wouldn't make a good filing clerk or policeman. Like, he knew from the get-go that art was his life.
Of course. And one thing I didn't know was one of the theater play posters that he had worked on, Night Lives, ended up becoming kind of the springboard for him to make the cover for the Books of Blood, the covers that, he painted himself.
Yeah.
And I could see where that would come from. You know, the various characters there in the poster rough that we can see from 79 that would give him an idea of, like, let's make a cover that has all these like characters that would be from each story or something. And then he ended up making characters who are not involved in actual stories.
Yeah.
Even though you can kind of draw some parallels with some of these, your brain starts thinking, oh, that looks like it might be the guy from the Book of Blood, and that looks like it might be one of the, the demon from the Yattering and Jack. And, it's funny to just look at that and think, is that just me kind of making it, believing that it is, or is it really like supposed to be it? So I guess we'll never know.
And Marcus, I wanted to go back really quick to what you had said, because I wrote out that whole quote. The confidence came out of two things. One, I knew that what I was doing wasn't quite like anybody else. And two, it was the only thing I could do anyway, so I might as well feel confident about it. Because sure as hell I would never be a very good policeman or filing clerk. So I love that quote for a lot of reasons. And, Clive had told Mark one time, like, there's true magic in boldness. And I think boldness and confidence are pretty close to the same thing, or pretty, close cousins, I think.
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, there's a lot of us that are sort of riddled with self-doubt, that it's hard to put stuff out there and think that, why would anybody be interested in what I'm doing, and it's true. It's like the people who can get past that are the people who, do good works like this.
Yeah. He also goes on to say that he knew the confidence sprung from the fact that he knew that he was doing something that no one else could do or was doing, and that he had it was his uniqueness that gave him the confidence to go, oh, yeah, I can do this. But yeah, I mean, Ryan, as you said, that is why I read that quote that opens this volume, is that he only really feels alive when he's making art, because he can't see himself doing anything else. And Jose, to tie back to the Night Lives poster, it also shows his love for Hieronymus Bosch, in that it's a very Boskian image of just having these characters that completely fill up the image.
Sure.
So
it's very 70s in the sense of design. I've seen this a lot in monuments and statuary around the 70s. They all look like they got these very striking, bold, profiled characters with strong chins and very bold lines. And it's totally like of its own period as well.
Yeah. Well, he also utilizes every inch of the piece of paper. I mean, it's all it really immerses you in the world, which is what Bosch truly does.
And the composition of the characters, like the triangular composition, a guy at the top, then two people next to him, then three down there, and then a few more in the corner, and they're all doing something. A very, very beautiful composition on that. But so one of the things that I also wanted to bring up here is that I did not know until I found this book that Clive also made a cover in the same style of the Books of Blood covers that he did for another writer.
I've seen that painting a lot with the snail, but I never put it together like what it was for.
Yeah, Richard Miller's book, Snail.
Yeah, I didn't know it was for a book. I know that there is a vinyl out there that has Clive artwork on it, and I do believe it has that image on it
with that Nazi snail on there.
Yeah, I think it's called Meat Hook or something like that. I might be mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
let me look it up.
And of course, here you see that Clive, on the opening pages of his draft manuscript for the Books of Blood, he wrote down one of Blake's proverbs that was, "What is now proved was only once imagined." And then, of course, even before I read the next page, I was like, well, it seems like Clive completed the sentence.
Yes.
Because he has another sentence that he likes to put on stuff, which is, "That which is imagined need never be lost." So if you read the Blake quote and then the Clive Barker quote, it's like a complete, aphorism.
Yeah.
It's like what is now proved was only once imagined, and that which is imagined can never be lost. Need never be lost.
Yeah.
So it just comes together full circle so well, like this Blake proverb and this Clive Barker sentence, that it just goes straight to that to show how the philosophy of art between Blake and Clive goes hand in hand.
Yeah. I looked up the vinyl. So that snail piece was used on a vinyl for Tumor Circus called "Meat Up My Rectum."
Oh, there we
go. And the vinyl itself actually
Meat Hook. Yeah,
and the vinyl itself also has an engraving of a Clive Barker drawing. So I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So they go on to talk about the relationship between Clive's trying to come up with something where he would actually start making more money. So he made up the Books of Blood. And artistically speaking, some of these characters and some of these covers that he was making were a way of Clive refining his artistic work. But one thing that you mentioned, Ryan, was that when people have doubt about their work, they have doubt about, well, I'm painting something, but I'm looking at it, and it's like, even though I spent like 10 hours making this drawing, ultimately I'm the only one who's going to see it because I don't know if anybody else would be interested in it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people out there who are artists, they have this sort of doubt, and then it's only when you put it out there that you find that your art will find its audience. You don't find the audience for your art. Your art itself will find its audience. The people who are drawn to your work, as long as they can find it, they will connect to it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Clive said, I think, in the Imaginary 4, and I'm jumping forward a little bit just to bring this sentence, is when the Clive moved to LA and eventually bought a house that he could use as a studio. That's when things took off, and that's when he says, and that's when I just could go into a studio and fuck up. And that's when he started making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of canvases. That's all you need. You can do like 20 canvases. If only 15 of those are going to be good, it's worth making the other 5 canvases that you will just paint over, But you got to do that. You got to do the numbers so you can put yourself out there and you can find out what works and what you're really trying to say.
Yeah, and he even if you watch the Man Behind the Myth special features from the Midnight Meat Train, he even says like the reason why he loved his art studio and being in there and creating is that there's no one standing over his shoulder asking him like, what is that? What does it mean? And that the enemy of art is the question why, and that art should be the answer. But just the freedom of painting and just being able to express himself in a way that no one else could interfere. I mean, writing is probably the second closest in being as free and open. But I mean, you still have editors, you still have publishers, you still have certain demands that might need to be met in that regard. Whereas he didn't have anyone telling him what he could or couldn't paint in his own studio. He could just let his mind go free and do whatever he wanted.
Whereas, like, right at this same time, he made a children's book of Weave World, and they're like, no, they rejected it.
Yeah.
Yes. Which was also a problem he had with The Thief of Always, too.
Yeah. And so everybody wants to pigeonhole him, and, it's like, no, you make horror stories. No one's going to buy your children's books.
Well, yeah, he even talks about that is the fact that he was being pinned as, just the horror guy, and that Weave World was his branching out. He even says, quote, "I don't seek to horrify in this book. I seek to enchant. I seek to have my imagination and that of the reader soar."
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, I feel like he really did communicate that to me early on when I started reading Clive Barker. I realized pretty quickly, I might have started with Hellraiser, but I realized pretty quickly, about what Clive kept talking about, the fantastique, right?
Mm-hmm.
The dark fantastic, that he was not a horror. He wanted to make stuff that was more fantastic in nature. And even though the Damnation game kind of skirts that a little bit, it's still kind of like a dark fantasy kind of novel.
Oh yeah, it's totally a Books of Blood story that's novel.
Right. But even the Books of Blood have moments of extreme beauty and moments of extreme like sophistication that are not just about, hey, here's the monster and he's going to kill you, and it's not just even the Forbidden has beautiful moments in it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm thankful to be a '90s Clive Barker fan because I got to discover things that were already out that were this varied, and and I didn't have time to pigeonhole him and say, no, this is what you're supposed to be.
Right.
In Weaveworld was his breaking out into his own, of breaking that stereotype of just being the horror guy. And because as I said before, he even says that his parents didn't want him to be a painter, so he went to university and studied philosophy. And Weaveworld is a very philosophical book. That's really the underpinning of it. It's metaphysics and it's philosophy. And personally, those are the two things that I love most in Clive's work, is that from here on out, for the rest of his bibliography, everything is very, very philosophical and very metaphysical.
Yeah.
Even Stephen Bissett, who wrote the introduction to the Illustrator book, Volume 1, he has this to say about Clive Barker's work. He says, this tome is dedicated to the only facet of Clive's work, his artwork. Bear in mind throughout the relation his drawings and paintings have with his other works. Here are doodles and sketches for stories and films, the seeds that are nurtured and transmutated into other forms. The application of reason to mold the raw impulses and imaginings of the unconscious into single coherent statements is to be applauded. That this discipline is evident in Barker's playful sketches, just as it is in his more carefully crafted and refined imaginative works, be they drawings, paintings, stories, novels, plays, or films, is telling indeed. This is not to say that Clive is a master artist like Hokusai or Blake, or that he is as innovative a graphic artist as he is a writer, for his artwork is not in and of itself innovative. But this book will show you how assured and skillful he can be, and how important his artwork is in the context of his great work, his oeuvre, and how his abilities as an artist widen his abilities to communicate. And, there's no better way of explaining how Clive's art makes you feel than this paragraph here. It's,
Yeah. In the Illustrator's volumes, as you guys talked about earlier, they're his drawings. They're ink pieces. They're not, for the most part, paintings. And this was the period in Clive's life where he kind of gave up color and was just working in these black and white pieces.
Yeah.
And he has a quote where he says, quote, "When I discovered Sumi Brush, my life changed. I began to be interested in how I could get a single line to express as many things as possible. When a line changes thickness, it speaks of emotion. You almost get into a kind of fugue state doing them. One of my many liabilities is that I can plan too much. It doesn't hurt me to remind myself of Cocteau's instinctive approach to things." And he goes on to talk about the Sumi ink pieces that he did for Weaveworld. But I mean that.
And also, I'm sorry to interrupt, and also how Lorca's drawings and Einstein's drawings and other people that we pigeonhole into just being scientists or writers, that they also made art, and it's also beautiful in its own way, and we just don't know about it as much. We don't talk about it. Yeah, but go ahead.
And that's you took the words out of my mouth, and that's the thing about Clive's art, is that so many people aren't aware of it because he is sadly just pigeonholed as just being the horror guy, and that that his paintings remain to a fair amount of even fans unknown.
Yeah, I think that changed a lot with it was a small beginning was The Thief of Always, and then honestly Abarat is the big one that I think after Abarat I don't think there's anyone out there that calls himself a Clive Barker fan that doesn't know about these beautiful paintings. But
I mean, even the Thief of Always, aside from the cover, were black and white Sumi ink, illustrations. Sure.
But
but I've also said before, when we were at Texas Frightmare, I had my copy of Imaginer 5 with me, and there was a woman who was standing next to me in line, and she asked what I was holding, and I showed her, and she had no idea that Clive was a painter.
Yeah,
And here's
that's the difference between horror fans and Clive Barker fans, I think.
Well, we all got to start somewhere.
Yeah. I didn't know until, I mean, I was aware that he made drawings and the like, because I had WeWorld and whatnot, and but I wasn't aware of how much of a prominent painter he was until I got the Abarat books.
And also, you called yourself a 90s Clive Barker fan, Ryan. I mean, in the 90s, before the internet, it was hard to have as much exposure to all this information about whatever you want to know.
Oh, yeah. No,
and,
I mean, exactly.
Yeah. Nowadays, you Google Clive Barker, you get thousands of images and stuff about him.
I just would go to a bookstore and ask them to print out this dot matrix list of every Clive Barker book there is.
That's exactly what I did too. Yeah, I would walk to my local Barnes and Noble and went down that rabbit hole.
Right. Now people can just see Clive Barker paintings if they just Google Clive Barker on their smartphone, and they can spend 2 hours looking at images.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of the information highway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so one of the very first painting in this book is, of course, John Mischief and his brothers.
Yes.
Very colorful, very whimsical. Abarat painting, of course. So he's like the porter of this universe that we're going to delve into right now. And I think it's a great painting to open up the volume. It's John Mischief.
He's the essentially the gateway for Candy to enter this other world that she's not.
Yeah, totally like Rictus in The Thief of Always.
Yes.
He's the Obi-Wan Kenobi for Candy Quackenbush's Luke Skywalker here. He's the one who says, "Hey, let's go to the Sea of Isabella," and all that stuff. Starts the hero in his adventure. But what better depiction of Clive's essence here? You look at him; he's got a little goatee and a little mustache, just like Clive. It's kind of like a satyr and Clive had a baby together, and it made John Mischief. It's just a crystallization of Clive's whimsical, beautiful, vibrant, colorful, weird but not horrible weird. He's smiling. He's got his little brothers sing to him and all that stuff. Yeah. So it's a perfect embodiment of Clive's non-horror art.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the kind of resemblances that John Mischief has to Clive himself. I honestly never really thought of that, but now that you mention it, I mean the fact that he has these 7 brothers on top of his head who are it's also reminiscent of Clive, in that Clive is a writer, and I'm sure that he has all these different voices having conversations and whatnot in his mind. So I guess Clive can also relate to John Mischief in that way too.
That's a wonderful point. And because we're living in the age of pandemic, I just want to draw attention to the second painting, which is called The Disease.
I know.
This picture represents how I feel right now.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. There's actually a piece, it might actually be in this volume, I'm not sure if it's in this one or 4, but called The Patient, that reminded me of the pandemic that we're in right now too. So that's funny.
Too real.
Yeah. I know. So what are some of your favorite paintings in this volume?
Ryan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I will put. I've been also painting D&D miniatures while we're talking.
Oh, wonderful. That's very fitting.
Yeah. So on 495, the Palace of Rain Lantern.
Oh yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that one. I had that one here as one of my favorites too. It's just such a beautiful rendition. It's just the world you want to live in.
Yeah. And a perfect showcase of Clive's use of a steak knife on the canvas, in that you have all these scratches that almost look like a sheet of rain going over the palace, but it's just knives of a knife.
That is so cool. Yeah, and it's in a way it's like negative paint, right? He's making rain by taking paint away.
Yes,
which is really cool. And this is also also kind of illustrates this style of his, where you have to step back a little bit to see the picture, because when you look up close, it looks kind of blurry and.
Yeah, it's just this chaos of color and texture. But yeah, as you step back, an entire world is revealed to you.
Yeah, I love that one. And this one kind of captured the imagination.
Especially if you're working on D&D right now, and
yeah,
you look at this, and it's like, I want to make a campaign on that big castle right there.
Yeah.
It looks more like a city. There's waterfalls coming out of it. There's spires. There's all these happy little trees, like Bob Ross would call them. I wrote some favorites here. I had like Axis, which is one of the first paintings that shows up, because Axis is, I think, part of a triptych. There's one triptych.
Oh yes, that is.
And Jose, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then there's another.
What page is Axis on? I'm sorry.
It is, so you have John Mischief. You have the disease. I think Axis is like the third or fourth.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no, yeah, Axis. Yeah. That
page
was
455.
Okay, thank you.
Christ condition.
So this is one of my very first introductions to his paintings, because when I bought this eBay, like 99 or whatever, when eBay first started, I bought this Clive Barker grab bag, and I got this big roll of like 15 or 20 of these Best Cutler Gallery New York posters that have this triptych on them.
Right, the Axis triptych. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and in fact, I still have like 5 or 6 of them if anybody wants to buy them.
Oh yeah, the posters. Yeah. I actually think this is one of the first images I saw too, because it's on the Forms of Heaven and Forms of Heaven collection of his.
Right.
And
exactly.
Yeah.
And
there's plenty of paintings in these 2 volumes that ended up becoming book covers. I want to bring up the attention to 479 here, page 479, Magma. I remember that this was painted sometime around when he was doing Mr. Be Gone. Mm-hmm. And I think I remember seeing a painting of a picture of Clive either exhibiting this at a signing of Mr. Be Gone or actually painting this at a signing of Mr. Be Gone. Mm-hmm. I remember he was painting something live during a signing. I'm not sure if this was it.
Yeah, well, this is 2 years before Mr. Be Gone came out, so...
Right. But this painting was doing the rounds when he was doing signings. There's a picture in Clive Barker's Revelations of certain signings that he was doing, and this painting was in a window of a bookstore saying, "Today we're going to have Clive Barker here signing Mr. Be Gone." So
that's cool.
It looks like a demon, right? It looks like a demon to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very monochromatic figure with just these very, very slight hints of red around the spirals of his body. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any favorites here, Marcus, so far?
One of my Imagineer 3 has probably my favorite collection of paintings overall out of the entire series. One of my personal favorites is on 457, called There Came a Messenger. And the reason why I personally like it so much is it's very, very different than the usual Clive Barker work. It has this very Fauvist color to it, where it's just this amalgamation of color within this alien-like form of a body.
Yeah, with like a hammerhead.
Like a hammerhead shark type head, but then the body is very loose with almost these tentacle-like arms.
Yes.
And then there's this weird abstract sphere-like thing behind the head that's just glowing yellow, and
these black triangles framed in gold.
Yes. Yeah, and you have like these tendrils of smoke kind of pouring out of the body.
And just the title makes your brain like race and try to figure out a messenger from where, right?
Yeah.
It's like
and it's so very different from usually his creatures have a somewhat human face to them, a human countenance, where this countenance is just so absolutely alien.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's why I've always been drawn to it, is just because it's the use of the color and just the weirdness of it, the mystery of it, I find really fascinating.
If you want to talk weird, you can go to 473, The Occupants of the Conflagration.
Oh, yes, that's one I had marked too.
Yeah, these two look like two demons in hell or wherever they might be. It's the conflagration. I guess you could see the fire. Is it like sparks in the background? Is it like flames? It looks like definitely some sort of sparks or whatever. And they just look like they were taken out of like a shaman cave wall. You know?
You have this cyclopean god type creature. With this hound-like companion, but
looking straight at you.
With it.
Cyclopean is a word that H.P. Lovecraft made up, right?
It comes from Cyclops.
Yeah.
Well, how could a city be Cyclopean?
He described the city as Cyclopean?
Yeah, he used that word all the time for describing these sprawling, like, alien cities and stuff.
It might have meant Cyclopean in the sense that Cyclops were giants in the Greek mythology, so maybe he's trying to give it a sense of scale. That's just my interpretation of it. Yeah,
Lovecraft loved to use very archaic words, so I'm not quite sure what the archaic root, if it's different than just meaning a Cyclops type.
But you're saying Cyclopean because this thing is a Cyclops.
Yeah, it has this just one giant looming blue eyeball that's just staring right at you with these long, lanky limbs, and him and his beast-like counterpart they appear to be striding, but striding towards what? I mean, is it destruction or? Jose, you were talking about how because it's a conflagration that you have like this fire, these meteorite type streaks going across the canvas. That
maybe I'm being too literal, but that's what it looks like to me, like sparks flying from a fire that someone's stirring or something like that. I
don't think so at all. And when you look at the next page, which is just this beautiful, beautiful detail shot, it looks like this is once again Clive is scraping away the top layer of paint to reveal a color hidden underneath.
Yeah.
Wonderful technique. Yeah, just like in the castle, the palace.
Yes.
Where the rain is just basically like the back of the brush just scraping on the canvas and makes the rain arise. But it doesn't get any more Cyclopean again than the mountain seas in page 487. It doesn't get any more Lovecraftian than that. They look straight out of the Mountain of Madness. Barrel shaped, one eye, tentacles in the top, a volcano, and again, just the one eye, just that one opening, almost like an almond shape, opening. Looks like something out of Space 1999. Yeah. And it's just amazing. Like some of these paintings are just so beautiful. And
it's just an outpouring of textures and color.
499, the Offering. That was the cover of The Magician in the Clive Barker archive.
Yeah, that was on my list.
Theater place. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's obviously painted much later in 2006, but it is a perfect picture for the cover of that book. And also kind of reminds you a little bit of that old Magician poster.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, but I think this might have ended up in the tarot card deck set.
It did. Yes. Right. Yes, it did.
I was
because
not
it just
fortunate
looked
enough to ever open those. I just send them to other people.
It looks like something that should be on a playing card, right? It has the same kind of colors, the red, the white, the blues, and it's just amazing. It's another one of those. And leading the way, it's page 503. This one, usually Clive makes a lot of like close-up shots or just busts of characters, but in this one, it's almost like the entire body, and it just the figure is. It looks like someone he would have painted at an event, right?
And
this is.
This
sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
Was also included as a little print that they
as a poster
into Imaginer 4.
Mm-hmm. This is actually this picture is the background of my phone right now, and Yeah, it's truly one of my favorites. The last time I visited Seraphim, they had essentially labeled and archived all the paintings into these storage spaces all around the office. Mm-hmm. So they weren't as scattered or disparate as they used to be. They were all put away. And this was the one painting that I asked Ben where it was so I could see it in person, and he pulled it out for me, and I got to see it.
That's cool.
But yeah, I absolutely love this piece. There's something about it. As you guys mentioned, it is a lot like his Imagining Man painting of where he would paint the human body as a canvas of its own, a living canvas. But there's just something about the fact that this character is looking at you, just straight on, and his body is just this moving mass of just color and texture that is springing off of his back and off of his head and off into the right side of the canvas. But then in his hands, he's holding this green staff-like thing that is just so opposite the red and yellow of the rest of the canvas.
I look at this and I see something. It's not a character. It's more like a representation of some sort of energy inside our body, because the background is red and it just looks like it's looking at you saying, yes, I am living deep inside you.
Yeah.
And I am part of you, and I am holding this like vine.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's just it looks like it's something that belongs inside you. It's I don't know how else to explain
it. No, you've conveyed that far better than I could have, because that's I just realized that's exactly how I feel, and I wasn't consciously aware of that. But yeah, no, that's so true. It's a really primal, evocative image that is really metaphysic. It's metaphysics made physical, if that makes sense at all.
It's like he's made out of fire, and he's like stuck inside you, and he's saying, I'm part of you. I am that part of you that shines, you know?
Some sort of brimming energy that needs to, this chaotic thing that needs to get out some way. And the fact that he's, as you called it, a vine-like staff that seems to be the amount of, that's what's in control. That's how you can wield this power, because the chaoticness doesn't go to the left side. It's only on the right side. So it never goes past that vine-like staff. So maybe that is the way to wield the chaos and use it as power.
It's like little ratatouille inside you, except it's your soul pulling on the little strings. Okay, I was just trying to make but I do want to appreciate the big details that they do with the 2 pages where they make the close-ups on these paintings that just give you an idea. It's just exactly how Clive accomplishes these effects on the canvas. It's just tremendous.
I wanted to go to page 511, the red top hats.
Oh, yes.
I love this painting. I love the looks on his face and the lizard's face. They're just looking at you like, what?
Yeah.
And also
I dare
the
you
fact
to say something about my hat.
I dare to say something about my lizard.
Well, yeah, the fact that the lizard has an identical hat to the man is what just puts the cherry on top of perfection.
Yeah, I love that.
I want to know if that's the only 2 hats in the picture, if there was supposed to be another hat downstairs. You know what I'm saying?
I would not put it past Clive to...
I know. Maybe this is part of a diptych, you know?
I think he would appreciate that question.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah, this is great. This is great stuff. Yeah. Let's see. What else did I have here? The Stitchling Army.
Yes.
The Stitchling Army, which I'm not sure if it's just a one canvas or it's a multiple canvas thing. Let me check.
What page is that?
Let's see. I forgot to put the page on it, but while I look for it, you guys can go ahead and talk about something else.
One of my personal favorites is on 469, and it's called The Executioner. And it is this reptile-like, I don't want to keep bringing up Lovecraft, but it is pretty Lovecraftian in that it's almost like a Dagon-like creature who has these spider-like limbs that are protruding from its back.
Yeah.
His torso itself is covered in these black spirals that gives it a very tribalistic look to it. And he's carrying a stick that he has over his shoulder, and from the stick is hanging a skeletal-like person who appears to be screaming. And it's just
like
it's such, yeah. And it's so the subject matter of it should be dark, but the fact that Clive uses these really bright colors in the backdrop to make it pop. I don't want to say it gives it a whimsical look, but I don't see darkness in it. I don't know. I really like the picture though.
The Executioner.
Yes, it's one of my favorites.
The Stitchling Army was page 556, 556, I think. And I think it's just a one canvas.
556.
Oh, yes.
The Stitchling Army.
I don't know if that is. Oh, it's 120 inch by 72 inch. So I'm actually going to say that's probably a diptych. It's probably the seam is probably right where the seam in the book is. It's probably two canvases set adjacent to each.
Oh yeah. So this one is on like Paul Kane's Monsters, I think.
Yes.
Stephen.
Yeah, I have that book collection.
It's a Lexicon of Fear, Stephen Jones Horrorology.
Oh yeah. So there we go.
The wrap cover. But this is definitely another Boskian piece in that you have these creatures that fill up every square inch of space on the canvas.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So this is from Abarat 3, you guys think?
Yes.
Okay. That's, again, the Stitchling Army, stitched by Matter Motley.
And each one is just like this screaming, grinning face with these red gums just gnarling at you.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, where does she get the teeth for these things?
I would say she used pebbles off the beaches of midnight.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Maybe.
And the pirate crew and Captain I on page 529. I love this painting. I love that in this painting, it seems like it's just so well done. Like all the highlights, all the expressions are just so perfectly captured. 529.
Yeah. You have this almost Philip Decker like mask on.
That's right.
Even though it looks like you have the button face, even though it doesn't appear to be a mask, but his face. Yeah. And upon his index finger rests an eyeball that he doesn't have. It's really brilliant.
And I just like the expressions on each one of these pirates' faces. It's they're just like so expressive.
This has got to be an unused Abarat painting, right? I mean, that's what it looks like.
Probably, yeah. It says here this is 1998.
Yeah, I don't know if this is actually in the Abarat books or not.
Yeah, it might not be Abarathian, but...
Or maybe it's just one of the ones that he was making when he was starting to think about Abarat.
Mm-hmm. Could be. There's definitely Abarat characters here. There's Betty Thunder, Clyde, and Legitimate Eddie on page 519. There's Elithuria and Numa Child, which the beautiful story of the Isle of the Nonce, right? Where
he actually did two versions of that piece.
Yeah, right. You can see another one. I think it's still in this volume or the next one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a lot darker in color.
Mm-hmm. It's more brownish. It's more darker tones. That's right. And of course, there's a really heavy one here in this volume, which is The Grieving Man.
Yes.
And this one, I think Clive made it after he found out that his dad had passed away.
What page is that on?
That's one of the last paintings.
Let me check.
It is 617. It's the second to last painting.
Yes. That is a beautiful painting.
Yeah, Brenda, when she was a substance abuse counselor, she actually had this print hanging up in her office, and there were a lot of people who came in and really related to that piece and took took comfort in the fact that I guess looking at it made them not feel so alone in that pain that they were going through at that difficult time. Yeah, it's a really, really evocative piece.
There's multiple levels to it because, one, the color is drained out of the picture. There's no background. It's made in grayish tones. Yeah. And it's just a man sitting on this rock that looks almost like an egg, but he's like, has his head in his hand, his face in his hands, and it looks like he's crying. And 2000, face in hands, grieving man. And of course there's Imagination, which was the cover of the father. What's the name of that?
That's on 541 because I wrote that one down too.
Yeah. What's the name of that book?
Oh, the
painter, the creature, and the father of lies.
Father of Lies.
There, thank you.
This is one of the few paintings that Clive has hanging up in his writing office currently.
Wonderful. Yeah. It's a different texture from the other paintings. It seems like a different texture. I'm not sure why it looks different to me, but it looks the texture looks different from the other paintings. I don't know how to explain that.
In one of the volumes, Clive talks about actually painting this piece, and I do believe that there was a painting underneath that he wasn't happy with, and he went over it with white, but didn't fill in all the grooves of the impasto, and he liked the texture of it, and then added the head and the color later on.
It almost looks like Chicken Town underneath.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. But yeah, you have it's a very monochromatic piece, but the area of the skull where the brain is just a fire with color and energy.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to that quote where he said that it's like somebody's pouring these colored syrups into his mind.
Yeah.
Jeez, I just got paint all over my. I had paint on my hand, and I was holding this figure, and I got it all over this.
That's a good start. Now you have to paint your arms, then your legs, then your face, then your torso, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I just need to scrape my hand with a steak knife.
Yeah. Give it some texture.
Yeah.
I mean, Imagine Volume 3, what a treat. Has some of these amazing canvases, some very monolithic Abarathian moments, like the wormwood that appears in Abarat 2.
Yeah.
Big ship that comes with Christopher Carrion into Chicken Town.
Yeah. And the last piece that I want to bring up is on 555, which is the piece I mentioned earlier called The Patient, which for me really symbolizes the feelings of the time that we're in right now, because you have this in my opinion this infected looking man who has all these red rivulets of color. In his skull is imprinted all these just blank staring faces that are staring out at you, and it's really, I don't know, I just get the feeling of a plague looking at it, of this thing that just needs to infect.
Oh, absolutely.
It's really ominous.
Yeah.
I got to say, though, the patient looks like he's the father of the child with the light bulb cranium on page 594. If you check 594, the child with the light bulb cranium, I challenge you to go real quick between both pages and flip them and see that doesn't it look like there's a resemblance there?
Yeah.
That's a far more whimsical piece, though, than the patient. But yeah, I definitely see it.
But definitely, I identify right now in quarantine with the Mad King on 565. That's me right there.
The Mad King.
565. That's me going like, I am tired of quarantine. I want to punch this virus in the face.
That is so perfect. Yes, that's wonderful.
Someone should make a movie where these characters become like feelings inside your brain, kind of like that Pixar movie or whatever it was called. I forgot the title. Yeah. Some of these creatures look like just feelings, you look at them and you're like, that's how I felt when this happened to me. That was just exactly how I felt. Like Jeffet Bird on 567. He looks like he's wearing a dunce cap.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Right? With like cat print on it. And it's like, he just looks like he's confused, completely confused.
Or going crazy from cabin fever.
Yeah, or going crazy from cabin fever. Exactly. Jeffet Bird speaks to me in a deeper level right now. I think I was looking at the computer earlier with this exact face. Oh boy. But Chet Zar writes the
the afterword.
Yeah, Chet Zar, who's made he was worked for Tool videos and stuff like that, right?
I believe so, yeah.
I think he's done some work with Tool.
Yeah, he makes really surrealistic paintings.
Yeah. And I like the part where he says that he was at Clive's studio when he was looking at paintings, and he was looking at a whole bunch of paintings. At one point, he was like, I'm just so tired. And, he needed a break just to absorb all the stuff he was seeing. And then he immediately felt that he wanted to go home and paint, which I guess is something that Clive's art also has this effect on you.
Yes. It
Marcus?
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah. Clive is a continual reservoir of influence and inspiration. Yeah. And Chet Zar's description of just feeling exhausted. I mean, you guys went to the old Seraphim office. I mean, I'm sure you guys felt the same way. It's so overwhelming, and you go through so much emotion. I remember when I was the first time I went, I was driving back to the hotel from the office. Like 5 minutes into the drive leaving the office, I pulled over and I just sat in my car and just kind of was lost in thought because I was so overwhelmed at that experience.
Yeah, you feel like Jack Skellington. It's like, what's this?
Yeah, and it's very overwhelming. But
when we got back to the hotel, I was sad. I was like, I just want to go back there.
Yeah,
can we just go back in the car and go there? I want to sleep.
You feel
sleep there.
You feel at home. I've always described it as my going there was like a very religious Catholic going to the Vatican.
Yeah,
like that's what it was like for me. It was almost a religious experience. But Chet Zar has a quote in this afterword where he says, quote, "There are very few artists who are able to conjure spirits in their work. They treat their palette and paints like some arcane grimoire and perform magic through a brush like a magician casts a spell. The spell, of course, is the painting. If you ever have stood in the presence of an original Clive Barker painting, you will understand what magic is." Mm-hmm. And that just really summarizes how I personally feel about Clive's art.
Yes. Magic with a K.
Yes.
When I was in the studio, there was a voice inside my mind yelling at my brain, remember all this stuff. Don't forget a thing.
Oh my
God. Put yourself in record mode right now and remember all this. Don't forget it. And then Ryan hands me the.
I felt the same exact way. I only took one picture, and that was standing next to the painting of Christopher Carrion. But I took no other pictures because I felt I was in the presence of something that was forbidden.
Yeah,
and I can't explain why. I mean, I was invited there, but like I felt like it was like this secret forbidden thing that I felt like
and it was like, oh my God, there's the Scarlet Gospels, and then of course that was like what everybody was clamoring for. And
then it's the feeling of going behind the curtain, right? It's the feeling of like seeing how the sausage is made in a way. To use a less than stellar analogy, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I used that. That's not a. Yeah. It's like seeing a movie and then being able to visit the set, and you feel like a trespasser there because, like, oh, wait, this is not what's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to watch the movie from the outside. I'm not supposed to be here and see these characters walking around with coffee cups in their hands. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, okay. You feel like you're trespassing because I'm not a part of this. I'm not a part of this. Why am I here? Yeah. But you are a part of this. You're the audience. You are the person who these paintings are in a sense made for, because it would be a shame if these paintings were just made for one person and they would be put in a garage and nobody would ever look at them. That's why these books are such a treat, and that's why these books are important. These books are the things that give these characters life. They give them an audience. They become a part of they become our memories. They become our own like creatures. We come up with stories, we come up with descriptions, we identify with these characters in certain ways. Like me and the Mad King during the times of quarantine.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of Mr. Begone too, in that, you know, you have these words that lie in wait, waiting to be read, but they have no power, they have no sway unless you are an audience, a participant in reading them. And you know, these paintings are the same thing in that we bring to something to them that also helps give them even more life, and they too in turn give us life.
So this ended up being a little bit longer than we had planned, which is great. I mean, we had a lot of really good discussion about Imaginer 3, but in order to keep us, I think, from cutting Imaginer 4 short, it'll be good to split this into 2 episodes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, let's do that. Gives us more time during these quarantine days to do other stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll give our listeners just that much more audio entertainment to keep, their minds and themselves occupied.
Hell yeah. Well, thanks, Marcus, for joining us for Imaginer 3. We hope to talk to you again for Imaginer 4.
Oh,
you started making reviews for 5, or was it 4 that you started?
4 was the first one. I did 4.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us for this. And I guess you'll do this podcast having no beginning will have no end.
Well, you just did it now, so we're good.
There.
All right. You can find the show notes for this episode and join the discussion over at www.clivebarkercast.com. We've got an archive of past episodes, news, features, and reviews, along with all the ways you can connect with us. You can subscribe on every other place you can find podcasts. Share your thoughts with us, and share our podcast with your friends. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and news blog that's not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.